It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Amelie Goldberg, and I work for the Institute for Industrial Productivity, and I'm going to be presenting about industrial policies for Europe on behalf of myself and my colleague Julia Renaud, who many of you probably know here today. Unfortunately, she's in China, so there we go. But before I start, I thought that because IIP is a relatively new organization, I would give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. We're a non-profit organization focusing on industrial energy efficiency. We work with government and industry to accelerate the use of best policy, technology, and financial practices worldwide. For maximum impact, we're focusing on energy-intensive industries such as chemicals, cement, and iron and steel, and in places that use tremendous amounts of energy, such as China, the US, and India. We have active teams in these regions and also a global best practice office in Paris. So this is where I work. We haven't done a lot of hands-on work in Europe, but we're constantly researching what Europe's doing. So I guess I'm giving you a bit of an outsider perspective from about what Europe's doing, and I'm sure you'll have perhaps similar or different views from the inside a European perspective. I won't go into too much from the World Energy Outlook modeling and scenarios, because we've already had a great presentation from Laura. But just to say that there are 4 scenarios, and obviously these are not targets, but they're just different energy and emissions trajectories that correlate to reductions or increases in energy demand, and also relate to different temperature increases. So under the new policy scenario, this is generally pointing to a temperature increase of 3.6 degrees, and under the 450 scenario, to 2 degrees, and I heard Laura in her presentation say the efficient world scenario was about 3 degrees. So while industry has a huge potential to improve energy efficiency, and I'll speak about this in the following slide, a lot of the global energy demand is actually not coming from Europe. 95% of it is coming from non-OECD countries. So this is because of the structure of Europe's economy, and also because it has announced and will be implementing a number of energy efficiency policies to 2020. You've seen this graph before, but I'll just focus a little bit more on industry. We can see that globally that there is more than 50% of unrealized potential in industry. So there's still a lot more that can be done. And in the more ambitious 450 scenario, the total energy efficiency potential contributes to more than half of the emission savings, and the industry sector accounts for about half of the energy efficiency savings up to 2020. You will all be very familiar with the goals of Europe, but just to recap here, we have the 20% greenhouse gas target for 2020, and modelling and European communication suggests that Europe will be well on track to meet this goal. There's also the 20% energy savings target, and this has been said to have been a little bit harder to reach. Europe has also announced some goals for 2050. The European Commission released last year a low-carbon roadmap in order to begin European-wide discussion about what would be needed after 2020. In order to seek agreed sector-specific solutions, the European Commission has also invited industrial sectors to develop their own low-carbon roadmaps, and I'll talk about this later on. This graph is from the European Commission's trajectories for different sectors necessary to achieve an 80% reduction in Europe by 2050. While the Energy Commission models and the World Energy Outlook models are separate, this trajectory is broadly or arguably compatible with European contributions within a 450 scenario. It basically shows that industry plays a key role in these reductions, and that Europe will need to step up its policy effort if it wants to reach these very ambitious goals. So how will it reach these goals? 50% of the reductions are possible through energy efficiency. So basically new policies announced to date, but also other energy efficiency measures that have been detailed in the Efficient World scenario. And up to 2020, energy efficiency will play a key role. But after 2020, additional measures will be necessary, including advanced industrial processes, new types of equipment and technology, the use of biomass, and industrial carbon capture and storage. But policies, current policies, or at least those that have not been included in the Energy Efficiency Directive, are not, will not result in a 20% energy efficiency improvement to 2020. In fact, only a 10% improvement. So including the directive, this is pushing up the reductions to 15% improvement, and the remaining gap coming from transport standards and the eco-design standards. In terms of specific measures, Europe has gone a long way to realise the potential that it has possible under the Efficient World scenario. Europe's emissions trading system covers industry as well as power, and has been an important regulatory signal for energy, for industry. We know that the carbon price has been quite low and hasn't been a very big signal in recent times, but the Commission has also just released plans to reform the carbon market in the short term, and this may help to increase the ETS as a driver for energy efficiency action. But Europe also needs complementary policies to remove market barriers and enhance Europe's competitiveness. Policies directly aimed at industry in some individual EU countries have been an important part of the policy context in the last decade or more. And these are often in the form of negotiated or voluntary agreements where companies can receive tax breaks or policy exemptions, and in exchange they set energy efficiency targets, implement energy management systems, implement profitable measures and procedures for life cycle costing and green procurement. Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Finland, Ireland have particularly successful programs, but there are not these types of programs prevalent throughout the rest of Europe. The Energy Efficiency Directive will encourage more industrial energy efficiency action. Here we have mandatory audits for large companies, and SMEs can receive incentives to conduct audits, but they're exempt from this. But arguably, energy audits may not be enough to provide continuous energy efficiency improvement. We've often seen that these can be one-off, they can be left on the shelf, and they may not bring in top management commitment. Energy management systems, on the other hand, provide a more comprehensive process and encourage top management and continuous improvement. Perhaps within the directive, more could be done to promote energy management systems and tying these to financial incentives, and also promoting industrial process optimization, energy systems optimization, especially in motors and cross-cutting equipment, and stepping up efforts to provide capacity building and training for SMEs. You're all relatively familiar with this graph. I've been talking mostly about the policies to unlock cost-effective energy efficiency potential in the pink area here, and also where the payback periods might be higher. Market mechanisms such as the EU ETS can help to realise the reductions in the blue area. But for technologies that hold a high greenhouse gas cost or remain in the R&D phase, technology support policies in this green area can reduce costs and bring technologies to the market in a much broader sense. And this approach has worked relatively well in the renewable energy sector through various support schemes. Moving beyond 2020, we've seen that these higher abatement policies are not widespread in Europe yet. There's been a lot of focus on measures to 2020, and there are some R&D research, development and deployment activities to 2020. But here I think the European Commission's low-carbon roadmap to 2050 is a good step for thinking beyond this. And the industry sector roadmaps are a really interesting initiative in this regard. Work has begun on these. The paper sector has already completed theirs. The cement sector, Sembureau, is now organising public consultation on these, and the EU steel sector and the chemical sector are currently developing theirs. So these efforts are really great and show the cooperation between company and government. But the roadmaps do need to result in implementable actions and be integrated into policy design and corporate policy. And because these technologies are so diverse and in different stages of development and different learning rates, we need support policies that are not technology neutral but rather are targeted. We also need to think a little bit outside of the box. Integrated solutions with a mix of stakeholders and collaborative governance models. And we're seeing these types of things emerge, for example, in China with factories and universities. We're also seeing the more widespread interest in eco-industrial parks, and in Denmark and other European countries have got a few interesting projects on these. And also perhaps we need to focus away from just industrial processes and think about products and integrated supply chains and looking at what these products will look like in 2050. To complement roadmap implementation, Europe needs to further strengthen and enhance coordination of industrial policy and research post-2020 to give long-term certainty to investors. The ETS should continue to play a key role, and these R&D deployment policies need to be upscaled to bring forward these new options into advanced and innovative processes and products. Finance is also a key area, and Yamina also talked about this for buildings, but I think it's also very relevant for industry, these new innovative mechanisms such as risk guarantee facilities that can unlock private investment. So just in conclusion, I've summarized some of the actions that Europe has and is taking under different scenarios, under the two, I guess, the better, more ambitious scenarios. Under the efficient world scenario, you know, Europe has gone a long way to realize the economic potential, but more can occur to unlock some of the remaining opportunities, especially in combined heat and power, energy management systems, energy systems optimization, and the widespread application of best available technologies. So while the 450 scenario, there's a very small window of opportunity to reach that, and it will depend on the rest of the world and coordinated global action. But Europe does have these very ambitious goals post-2020, and so if it does want to realize these, it's great to see the low-carbon roadmaps, and it will be interesting to follow the discussions on what concrete actions arise out of these. Thank you.
Kirsten Mikkelsen from EA Energy Analysis in Denmark. Just a clarification question. When you talk about emissions from the industry sector, are you talking about only the energy-related emissions, but also the process-related?
Yes, I mean, I guess up until 2020, yes, but then I think when we're looking at these breakthrough technologies and this focus on new products and things like that, then we're talking about both.
And where would we find the most efficient industries globally?
Well, I think Europe does have a lot of efficient industries, and so you saw from the graph that there's less potential in industry compared to buildings, but there still is a lot. And I'd also say that a lot of the large industries are currently operating, pretty efficiently, but there is still quite a lot of outdated capacity in some parts of Europe, and it is very mixed as well. I mean, India is building a whole lot of new, extremely efficient plants, big plants, but there's a lot of smaller, smaller inefficient plants as well. So
we just finalized an analysis of all the energy efficiency policy in industry under the MUO project, and there is a book which is published right now. And when I look the type of measures which are implemented in industry, 40% are financial scheme. And in your diagnosis, you mentioned voluntary agreement, you mentioned ETS, but you didn't mention nothing on the most important policies, which are financial scheme. And this is very important to stress that the most important policy right now implemented in industry are still financial scheme. And so we can speak about energy management, we can speak about voluntary agreement, but the bulk of the policies are financial scheme. Secondly, what we have seen, one of the targets is what kind of policy we can implement in SMEs. And maybe something that you can elaborate on. But what is the future for you about subsidies policies, which are the most important current policy in Europe for industry?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of financial schemes. The ones I know of are mostly incentivizing efficient equipment. Are those the kinds that you're speaking of? But basically, I also think that we need to move beyond just incentivizing equipment to also providing, tying these incentives to energy management systems implementation as well. So rather than, I think they'll still definitely play an important role, but I think we can go even further and say, I know that Denmark had this for a while where they said that if you're a part of the voluntary agreement where you implement an energy management system and you have it certified, then that is when you receive the financial incentives for the industrial equipment. And the second point, on SMEs, yes, there have been some European projects on this, the BESS and the ex-BESS, and I think these have been really great, but I think they've come to a stop, so it would be good to see these types of initiatives continue.